Alhamdulillah, today we had a nice time at Jum'ah. Um, I gave a khutbah that was discussing humility and, how do we not only come to define it, but how can we come to implement it and practice it. And so I was thinking after the khutbah and, talking with a few people, um, afterwards and their reaction to it. And it got me to thinking about the presidential debates, that I saw the other day. And in the khutbah, one of the things I had mentioned is that, humility is a disposition of the heart, right? It's not simply an intellectual disposition, which in some ways is kind of more of the Stoic, Greco-Roman tradition of humility, whereas in Islam, humility is very much seen, it could be seen as a worldview, um, and it's a issue of disposition, right, of the heart. And when I was listening to all of the different candidates talk about their positions, I kind of like Andrew Yang. I mean, he seemed like kind of interesting, right? But when I was listening to all of them talk and they were promising how they were going to legislate away this or that problem, they were going to legislate away racism and they were going to legislate away the gun problem. And I could see that I was like, wow, this is why religion is so important. This is why Islam has so much potential here. Because people just have no idea what the problem is, and therefore their tactics of trying to address it are kind of almost guaranteed to fall apart, right? That they don't even see the problem of racism as a problem of the heart. They don't see the problem of violence, whether it's, white nationalist shooter, whether it's gangbanging in the hood, whatever that it is, they don't see that kind of inclination towards violence, right? A problem of the heart, and therefore a lack of humility. We talked in the khutbah that, right, there's that last beautiful section of the 59th chapter of the Quran, Surah Al-Hashr, and Allah says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, O people of faith, ittaqullaha, right? Have fear of God, wal tandur nafsum ma qaddamat lighad. Not only just fear God, believe in God, love God, whatever your emotion is with God, right? But also look at yourself and what you're doing for tomorrow, right? That's what I don't see coming from, and perhaps I would advocate cannot come from legislation. And therefore everybody getting caught up in what this politician's solution is and what they're promising they're going to do. And they're going to fall flat, at least in this area, just as every other politician has, because they're not even willing to bring faith into the conversation. This is one of the shortcomings of hyper-secular societies that want to relegate faith to the cupboard, to the closet, or perhaps, parade it out to get votes. But when it really comes to faith in society where it can really do some good, it's kind of banned from even, being part of the process. So when I was listening to all these guys talking about, we're going to do A, B, and C, I'm like, none of that's going to work. You're not addressing. And this is where it also shows either how just full of BS politics is, which I tend to lean towards, right? Or how just completely clueless that it is, in that it's spineless, like it lacks a kind of courage. Now it wants to tackle some enormous problem like gun violence or racism, but it's also not willing to talk to the participants, meaning the perpetrators and the victims both alike, in a language that addresses them directly. So, it might be, it might be somewhat uncomfortable to go into the hood and tell people like, hey, look, you got all this violence on the block. Part of it is because the hearts of the people are screwed up, right? Are we having this conversation in Black America when we talk about violence in the hood and this and that, and when we talk about these issues? Are we willing to come out and be like, you know what? We got a problem with the hearts. Our hearts are not in a good condition, are not in a good place. In fact, how does a person get to the point of not just racial bias, which I think to some degree is kind of normal, right? But to the point that you want to cause other people some type of harm because they are different than you ethnically, right? Allah says what? وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ نَسُوا اللَّهَ فَأَنْسَاهُمْ أَنفُسَهُم. Don't become like those who forgot Allah and Allah made them forget themselves. One of the things with these corrupt hearts, with this lack of humility, is undoubtedly we have forgotten we are one race. We have undoubtedly forgotten that we are all descendants from Adam and Hawa, all from Adam and Eve, that we were all created by God. This needs to actually be injected back into the conversation about the various social ills that are facing us that clearly cannot be solved by just writing more laws, writing more bills, ramping up more bureaucratic red tape, right? And this isn't, I'm not making the case that somehow all politics is, like, we shouldn't do politics, or I'm against government, or I don't know. I'm not making the case for any of this. What I'm saying is we should be leery of a government on its own, doesn't need any help kind of approach. It's like, no, you need faith. You need the involvement of religious communities that really probably will only have the remedy to get at the source of the issue with these people that want to kill, right? And the thing is, right, this will undoubtedly take time. It may even take generations, right? It's going to something that will not be eradicated in a very, very short amount of time. It's going to take a lot of commitment to this. So when I was watching, these debates and the presidential debates, and then thinking about it, after today's khutbah and whatnot, in some ways I was like, there's plenty for us to do. We don't need to be overly consumed with political representation or this particular politician or this political party gonna do this for the Muslims and gonna do that. You know what? We need to be doing. There are problems that simply the government is not going to be able to fix or to solve. And we need to become the people that go out and are connected with, just the general populace. And you're like, you know what? We do have a solution for violence. We do have a solution for killing, right? And that's not based upon, let's say, look at the Muslim world or this or that. Yeah, because they're not doing Islam. Right? A big issue in the Muslim world is Islam isn't being done. Now, I'm not going where some people are saying, whether that's because I'm going to lay it all on the people or the rulers. I'm just saying we have to not look to the Muslim world as a means of being able to ascertain the thing being true, right? The Book of Allah is giving it. That's the acid test, right? And therefore, just locally, how can Muslims become involved and care in these things of changing the hearts of people? Because without doing so, right, encouraging people and giving them models, right, giving them actual formulations of how do you become a humble person, but as I mentioned in the khutbah, you don't have to become weak, right? Just talking about men, some men may be very uncomfortable with the idea of humility because they feel there will be some kind of emasculation, and yet we have an example in the Prophet in which a person can most definitely be manly, The Prophet ﷺ used to wrestle men and throw people on the ground and, do these kinds of so-called manly activities, right? And yet was also considered to be shy and humble. And we need to be able to somehow inject this back into our social DNA. We need to have a conversation about humility that is not just, again, either a kind of affectation or some kind of weird Zen, Greco-Roman virtue, right? It is humility specifically for the case of God. Inna Allah bima ta'maluna khabir, that Allah is aware of what we're doing, and therefore we have the desire to want to rearrange our behavior that will fall in accordance with his pleasure. So it was just something that made me, kind of scratch my head afterwards. I'm like, this is, inshallah, this is something we can do. I hope this will motivate some of us to get out there, get involved in people. And perhaps this is the grassroots movement, right? The grassroots movement of going back to humility for the sake of God. That would be I don't want to say political, but that'd be a movement certainly that I could certainly put some weight behind. So, Jazakumullahu khairan. Imam Marc signing off here from still very hot and sweltering SoCal. Assalamu alaikum.